Hi there, my name's Michael. Welcome to another episode of the Consultus Chat. Today I'm joined by Grace. Grace, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so my name's Grace Carpenter. I'm the international team lead here at Consultus. I currently head up the procurement and delivery team. So I'm responsible for the negotiation of all of our European energy contracts, and also I play a big role in our global purchasing strategies as well.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us. Really, the theme today that we want to focus on is your area of expertise. So, really, to start off, I'd love to talk a little bit about the key characteristics and themes of a successful global purchasing strategy. What does that look like?
I think for me, it really looks like a centralised strategic approach. What I mean by that is that essentially that strategic approach then feeds into our kind of country activity.
And so, what does that look like in practice? What is a centralised strategic approach? What are the key elements of that?
I think the key element is a lot of our multi-territory clients, it's making sure that we can manage all of that portfolio from a centralised point of view. And what I mean by that is a centralised approach to data management, visibility across all countries in terms of data, procurement, tendering, and really just honing in to that joined up approach across all territories.
Okay. I guess a key question, if you've got you're an organisation with lots of sites in different countries, say particularly Europe, can you have a supply contract that joins all the borders together? Does that exist? You can have a supply contract with one supplier? In
short, no. There are global suppliers that operate in a number of different countries. So, for example, you've got Iberdrola in Portugal and Spain. The difference is that the contractual framework will be built differently, the products will be differently, and essentially how I always describe it is those suppliers, although under the same umbrella group, will operate completely separately.
Okay. So unfortunately you still have to do individual activities
exactly.
and all the work that needs to be done at country level. So a lot of the activity that you and the team are involved in is about getting utility contracts in place, making sure that they're good value. What are you and the wider team involved in once a contract's placed? What key activities then follow that perhaps clients see great value in?
I think the main one, and again links to that kind of centralised data approach that we spoke about, is our bureau and bill validation services. So once a contract's signed, there will be a set of expected costs, and our teams work very hard and closely to understand the impact of those costs, if those costs align with those that are expected. And we can also ensure that there are no errors, so identify errors in the invoices and recuperate any monies owed, essentially.
Okay, excellent. So Grace, you mentioned about data and the sort of benefits and needs to centralise that. Mm-hmm. Could you explain a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So what we often see again with clients that have require our services across multiple different countries is they want to be able to access that data and view that data strategically across a number of different countries on one platform. So we'll often have clients with a number of different stakeholders at different levels. Mm-hmm. We have platforms in-house that enables clients and stakeholders at all different levels to be able to see that data country by country.
Okay. And talk to me about kind of the needs of data from an energy point of view and bridging the gap to net zero. How does that help from a centralised approach?
Absolutely. So obviously with net zero goals being at the forefront of a lot of our clients' kind of mission, I suppose, they're really keen to have visibility on what their patterns of consumption are. So that data allows us to form all of our kind of forecasts and budgets. It allows clients and stakeholders at all different levels within an organisation to have visibility of their budgets, forecasts, and essentially, I suppose, it forms a kind of carbon reporting mechanism, enabling them, I suppose, to forecast costs and also feed into their renewable sourcing as well.
Okay, all right. So we have this situation where, unfortunately, you cannot get cross-border contracts, join everybody, all locations into, say, a European supply contract. So what's important from a tender management point of view if you have to go to a number of different providers in different countries? What does that look like from a centralised, and then you reference dropping that down into in-country activity? What does good look like from that perspective?
I think so. When I talk about a centralised strategic approach, it's about understanding the risk for appetite within the organisation, and then from a kind of country level, it's about understanding how the market at country level can allow for that strategy to take place. So it's understanding the contractual frameworks, the products, if there are any limitations, if there are any nuances we need to understand about that particular market, and that's where we would decide individually on a country by country level what's best within that territory. An example is one of Consultus's main strategies involves a buy and sell mechanism. A big part of our procurement work and tendering work is analysing whether the contractual framework would allow that buy and sell mechanism to take place. Obviously, if it doesn't, then we would recommend a different type of strategy. So that's kind of what I mean by the difference between the drop down to country level from that kind of centralised approach.
Okay. And in terms of that centralised approach, how does that benefit the business from a buying point of view or a reporting point of view?
So a lot of our clients will have a centralised contact point, and then they will also have a number of different stakeholders, and those will be across the whole of Europe. What Consultus does is it enables us to kind of join up all of those stakeholders, make sure that they're aware of the nuances, the products available, and also the market opportunity. And then it allows us to form a kind of predetermined approach to both the tender planning and the tender process. And it means that all parties are joined up on our recommendation on both product type and also contract type as well.
How do you go about predetermining the approach that you take?
So normally what would happen is it would be in the form of a kind of pre-tender presentation. Usually what happens is our procurement team alongside our risk teams would join up, and we would assess the market opportunity and also the market landscape, both from a historic and a futures point of view. We would also assess the products that are available within the market and also the supplier appetite, I suppose. We're seeing more and more suppliers open up to being able to provide offers since COVID and since the energy crisis. With all of that in hand, we would combine that to make a recommendation based on both the market landscape and the kind of product feasibility, and we would present that back to the client. This would then allow us to determine the kind of approach that we're taking to tendering and to launch that tender as such.
You mentioned about some of the market factors in recent times. How has that impacted the market? The energy crisis, high energy prices, and the impacts on businesses. How does that look like for you and your team, sort of delivering these strategies day to day?
It's a great question. I think this year in particular, in 2024, is definitely easier than last year. What we saw in 2023 was a lot of clients were coming out of contracts at really low unit rates. And obviously since the spike, there's been a big hike in prices. While there's still nervousness, both with our clients and also suppliers, we are seeing that more and more suppliers are opening up to new products, new clients, and that is definitely improving. We're also seeing much more leverage to be able to kind of negotiate, get the best value, whereas before, obviously, there were limitations as such with when the crisis was happening.
So talk to me about those limitations and perhaps barriers, the challenges that are most prevalent still today. What do they look like and how do you deal with those?
The main barrier was, of course, the huge spike in prices. I think we can all agree that we saw absolutely unprecedented levels of pricing points going through the roof, essentially. What that meant was a lot of suppliers were withdrawing from being able to provide products, and that limited our supplier pool. So what I mean by suppliers opening up is that there is much more appetite now for suppliers to take on new clients, and that we are seeing as a kind of global sentiment across Europe and APAC.
So more choice, improving energy markets and hopefully better prices and opportunities for organisations. Okay, definitely. Fantastic. In terms of energy markets across different countries, are the markets linked? Do the same price drivers kind of drive energy prices the same in Germany, France, Spain, and so on and so forth? How does that look, and how does that impact the work that you do day to day?
It's a really great question. We tend to find that the markets follow this kind of same tendencies, I suppose. Evidently, there are different price points in every market, but in general, the same sentiments kind of characterise the European markets. What I would say is that Australia and New Zealand are definitely very isolated in that sense. Okay. We find in Australia there is a lot less visibility further out, so for the futures trading market. and they tend to move in isolation to the European markets. But in general, we do find that they kind of tend to follow the same patterns.
Yeah. Okay. We talked a little bit a moment ago about data and how that can help an organisation from the carbon reporting point of view. Obviously, a big part of organisations is now net zero and their goals to move towards that, particularly from a corporate point of view. Does renewable energy sourcing come as a big part of the activity that you and your team do day to day?
Absolutely, yeah, and it's something that we always incorporate into our contracts. So the approach that we take is that we go off, obviously, each individual client spec, but what we would usually do is we would obtain the kind of renewable costs in each country to present to the client as an option. We can also offer renewable certificates through suppliers. There are multiple options that you can take. Usually what a client will do is the easiest option is to procure renewables through the supply that they're procuring with.
Mm-hmm.
But there are options to go out to the market as well. We're also seeing more and more demand for things like PPAs.
Okay.
So PPA sourcing is a big thing that my team do, and usually the process is that we want to ensure that the PPA volumes can be sleeved into existing supply contracts, and that again is part of that sort of centralised approach that we take.
Okay, excellent. Well, Grace, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Thank you very much.